Welcome back, my friends. Today I want to show you how to shorten the strap, especially when we have beaded lace. As you see here, we do have the lace with beads. I know some dresses, they sew the beads all the way through the fabric, and sometimes when we're removing the beads, we always have to remove it by hand and then sew it back. But in some dresses, very luckily, they do sew beads on lace first and then they sew it on a dress. So first thing what I'm doing is measuring exactly how much I have to take in it, which is 1 inch on each side, or total is 2 inches. Now we are ready to remove this lace. Luckily, this lace with beads was sewed almost by hand, so we're gonna remove this thread first. As you see, I do pull the thread. I'm not cutting in pieces because I wanted to tie it together with the new thread, and then we'll be able to sew it back when the strap is ready. Now let's take a look inside. On the wrong side we see the lining, and also you see the top stitch on this side. So this side usually we open less than the under. So remember, when you see the top stitch right here, that means the opposite side have to be open more than the top part. So first what I'm gonna do is remove the top stitch, and when I'm removing the top stitch I do remove more than 1 inch. Why? Because when we're gonna sew it back the strap, it will be easier for us to sew it all the layers, because our top stitch is going to be on our way. So this is why we're opening a little more than 1 inch. And as you see, very carefully we remove the thread one by one stitch. Make sure you don't damage the fabric, and let's finish removing next. After we removing the thread, opposite side we're gonna open the seam. I'm gonna use my seam ripper, and we will open probably around so let's say if we have to take in 2 inches, I'm gonna open 3 or even 4 inches to open, so it'll be much comfortable for us to adjust the seam, since the strap is not super wide and you can see the allowance is so small. So we need to make sure to open enough to adjust the strap. Now when we take a look inside, you can see this top stitch. This stitch is
lining.
sewed together.
So we need to open same thing like
fabric.
1 inch.
So we do need to open this seam as well, and I will open
over.
more than 1 inch. So let's say
that.
1 inch we have to take it in, then I will open like 1.25 inches or 1 inch, maximum 1.5 inches. And then we're gonna be able to work and adjust the seams next. Alright, so our seams are open and you can see all the lining and the fabric is separate. Now we can adjust the basic fabric first or the lining first, it doesn't matter. As you see on our side, the allowance are sewed together, so make sure you remove that too. Now I'm placing the fabrics same length, and we are ready to adjust the strap. You can also add a pin, so it'll be much comfortable for you to sew together.
And I will mark 1 inch.
Just a little tip, if you don't know, I am using the removable pen, and this is the brand. You can find it on Amazon or on other platforms. It's very great, but also make sure don't use red on very white or ivory dresses. Make sure you use green, blue, and others. I do have the tutorial where I'm explaining what color works on each fabric color. Now let's adjust the strap the amount that we marked 1 inch, but also make sure you do the back stitch right at the beginning of the sewing stitch and at the end as well. You want to make sure the stitch, it will be very strong and it will not rip in case if the customer want it like tighter or anything like that. With allowance, we want to make sure to leave extra. I usually leave at least 3/4 of an inch. Why? Because sometimes it happen customer changing mind and say, oh, it's too tight. So to let it out, we want to make sure we do have extra just in case to let it out, right? I didn't have cases where I have to go back and let it out, but you want to make sure you have extra fabric inside to provide the best service for your customer, and always listen to your customer and always ask questions if they are happy, in case if you have the business with alteration. And please don't avoid to give me any question in that particular department. I am happy to help. After 20 years of experience, I'll be happy to share what my experience had with customers and what else I can help you. Now, as you see, I am getting ready to adjust the lining part, and I also will mark 1 inch from one side and other side, and then we'll be able to also sew it together, adjust it, and then cut it. Allowance 3/4, that's how we left on the right fabric as well.
Same thing, we're gonna cut.
So we adjusted the lining and the basic fabric. So now what we have to do is take the allowance and open one side and other side. Why we do that? Because we don't want to have a thick layer of the fabrics when we're gonna sew together the seam. And now, as you see, I am trying to make it straight, and I mean, like, if it feels uncomfortable for you, make sure you open a little more allowance, because that's what makes us uncomfortable to sew the seam together, since the strap is super tiny, and I will open a teeny tiny more. After you open, you can see this top stitch right here, and this is our sewing line. So we need to match this sewing line, and this is why I will open the allowance one more time, and you're welcome to pin it together if that makes it easier for you. I also match the seam. As you see, we don't want to make the seam to be off, so this is why I always match the seam together. When the fabric is a little thick, we want to put back the top stitch that we removed, because it will hold the allowance inside and it will keep it flat. If the fabric, let's say it's chiffon and the lining, then you don't have to worry about to put that top stitch back. So I'm gonna sew the top stitch, and then we'll start next steps. Next, as you see, I did add the top stitch, and now we are ready to close the other seam. Since the other seam we don't have access to sew with sewing machine, I want to make sure to press it a little bit, the strap, and then I'm gonna close everything with hand stitch. As you see, I do open the allowance. You also can add a stitch if that makes easier for you as a beginner, and then we just can fold all this allowance inside and sew with needle and thread. All we need to do is just hide the allowance inside. Also make sure to match the seams as well, and you can pin with the pins to make sure it's holding in place, and it will be easier for us to hand stitch. Everything is ready, so now we're ready to take a needle and thread and start hand stitching. When we're closing, it's kind of like running stitching when you pinching one side and other side and just pull your thread. Make sure to do the small stitches, because if you're gonna do the big stitches, then you probably could see some big holes between the layers, so you don't want that. So this is why we do small stitches, and we almost done with the strap. The only thing we know we have to do is just to add it up back the beaded lace, and all set. And the final touch is to sew the lace, beaded lace back. So when I'm working on beaded lace, I always double check, is it looks nice if we're gonna put one on top of each other? Doesn't, right? So this is why I always double check and see, okay, what can I do? I can cut a small piece from here side or from other side. And then I just place it and see one more time, is it looks nice if I will sew even flower on flower. So if you're gonna look on one side, I'll show you from one side. You see it's just not right, it looks just too thick. So what we're gonna do, we just cut another flower and place that one on top. Now we're gonna take the needle and thread, and then I will make a knot, and then I will tie it with the old thread that we had. Like 2-3 times it's enough, and then you can cut the old thread, and then we can sew the lace back. When we're sewing the beaded lace, we want to make sure to hide the knot inside, like behind the lace. And then when we're gonna sew around, we want to make sure to make small stitches so they're not really visible on the front side.
On that side. Then I'm gonna tie it with the old thread also. That way we connect the thread and it's not gonna open the lace. Perfect. So we got the old thread
strap is ready. Just make sure to press it from the wrong side, not the right side, and if you have the from the pan some spots, then just steam it on top and you all set. Do not press ever on top of the beads. So I hope this tutorial helped you a lot. Thank you so much for watching and subscribe for more tutorials.